Chosen one. If you found this message now, not earlier, not later, there is a reason for the timing. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm not here to stir emotion. I'm simply meeting you in a quiet moment where your spirit was already listening. You may have hesitated before pressing play, or maybe you didn't. But something in you recognized the tone before the words even formed. That recognition matters more than you think. You've been discerning lately, more quiet, less reactive. You don't rush to explain yourself the way you used to, and because of that, doubt has tried to creep in. You've wondered if you're falling behind, if staying silent means missing something, if waiting has cost you momentum. It hasn't. What you're experiencing is not delay. It's positioning. There are seasons when God draws you inward before He moves you forward. Scripture hints at this pattern gently, not loudly. Even Jesus withdrew before major shifts, not to hide but to align. Silence is not absence. Silence is refinement. You've noticed things changing inside you that you can't fully explain. Your reactions are different. Your desires are simpler. What used to excite you no longer holds the same pull. And part of you wonders if this is loss. It isn't. It's preparation. God is preparing your next level of prosperity, but not the kind that announces itself early. Not the kind that needs to be defended. This is the kind that requires discretion. The kind that grows best when it isn't exposed to every voice, every opinion, every interruption. That's why you felt guided to stay quiet, not because you're afraid, not because you lack confidence, but because what's forming in you is still tender. There are things God can only entrust to those who know when not to speak. You've been learning restraint. You don't overshare anymore. You don't feel the need to prove your worth. And while others may interpret that as distance or weakness, heaven sees it as maturity. You're not shrinking. You're stabilizing. I know you've questioned yourself at night, wondered if anyone sees the internal work you've been doing, wondered if obedience without applause still counts. It does. There is a kind of prosperity that begins internally. Peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. Clarity that doesn't rush decisions. Confidence that doesn't need validation. These are signs that your foundation is being reinforced. And foundations are always built quietly. You're being trained to carry more without announcing it. To hold blessings without leaking them. To move with wisdom instead of impulse. This is why your spirit has been drawn to stillness lately. Be careful not to mistake stillness for stagnation. God often speaks most clearly when everything else is quiet. And you've created that space, even when it felt uncomfortable. Even when it meant being misunderstood. That's discernment growing. The reason this message reaches you now is because you are standing at the edge of something new, but it requires a posture you didn't have before. Silence, trust, inner agreement. Prosperity at this level is not loud. It doesn't argue. It doesn't announce itself to those who aren't aligned. It waits for the right moment, the right vessel. You are becoming that vessel. So if you felt the urge to stay reserved, to move carefully, to let God handle the timing instead of forcing outcomes, you're not imagining it. You're responding correctly. This isn't about pulling back from life. It's about being selective with your energy, your words, your intentions. Stay still. Stay listening. Stay aligned. You haven't been overlooked. You've been set apart. And this moment, right here, is simply confirmation that the silence you've been honoring has meaning. Something has shifted in you, and it didn't happen all at once. There was no announcement, no single moment you could point to and say, that's when everything changed. It happened quietly over time in the way you think, the way you respond, the way you sit with yourself when no one else is around. You are not who you were, but you are also not fully who you are becoming. That in-between space has felt lonely, not because people left, but because fewer people can meet you where you are now. You've noticed the distance. Conversations feel different. Topics that once filled hours now feel empty. You listen more than you speak, not because you have nothing to say, but because you're more aware of what doesn't need to be said. And that awareness has created a quiet separation between you and others. You've been misunderstood in this season. Some think you've changed for the worse. Some think you're distracted. Others think you're hiding something. But none of those interpretations touch the truth. What's happening is internal alignment. God often changes the inside long before the outside reflects it. There's a locking in of identity that happens away from attention, a strengthening of inner structure. You're learning who you are without feedback, without applause, without permission. That's not easy. There were times you wanted to explain yourself, to clarify your silence, to reassure people that you're still the same. But something in you held back, not out of pride, out of instinct. That instinct is discernment. You're becoming aware that not everyone needs access to every version of you. Even Jesus spoke differently depending on who was listening. Not to deceive, but to protect what was sacred. Your growth has required isolation, but not abandonment. God has been close in this quiet, closer than when everything was loud, closer than when you were constantly engaged. You may not feel dramatic faith right now, no emotional highs, no constant reassurance, just a steady, grounded sense of keep going. That steadiness is maturity. There's a reason you're less reactive, a reason you pause before responding, a reason you don't rush decisions anymore. You've learned that peace leaves when you move too quickly, and so you wait. Others may interpret your waiting as passivity. Heaven sees it as wisdom. You've been shedding identities that were built on performance, roles that required constant proving, labels that only existed because others needed you to be predictable. Those layers couldn't come with you into what's next. Scripture speaks of renewing the mind, but renewal isn't instant. It's a process of unlearning, of letting go of habits that once kept you safe but now limit you. You felt that tension. Part of you misses how simple things used to feel, how automatic your responses were, how easily you fit in. But another part of you knows you can't go back without betraying who you're becoming. That's the lock setting. Identity doesn't fully solidify until it's tested in isolation. Until you choose integrity when no one is watching. Until you remain consistent without external reward. You've been doing that. You're learning to sit with silence without filling it. To trust God without needing constant signs. To move from inner conviction instead of external pressure. This is why fewer people understand you now. It's not because you've become distant. It's because your language has changed. You speak from depth now, and not everyone listens from there. Let them misunderstand. This season is not about being seen correctly by people. It's about being aligned correctly within yourself. God is anchoring you so that future movement doesn't shake you. You are becoming steady, rooted, clear. And once identity locks in at this level, it doesn't unravel easily. You don't need to announce who you are becoming. You don't need to defend your quiet. You don't need to explain your growth. What's forming in you will speak for itself in time. For now, remain grounded. Remain honest. Remain still enough to hear what's next. This identity you're stepping into was never meant to be crowded. It was meant to be carried with peace. There is something important you need to know. even if it hasn't been spoken out loud to you yet. God has been noticing the changes you made when no one was affirming them, the decisions that felt small, the moments where you chose restraint over reaction, the quiet obedience that didn't come with immediate reward. None of it was missed. You may have wondered at times if your effort mattered, if choosing differently again and again without visible results was worth it, especially when others seemed to move ahead faster, louder, with less resistance. But heaven does not measure progress the way people do. God looks at alignment. Every time you broke a familiar pattern, something shifted in the unseen. Each time you paused instead of speaking, waited instead of forcing, trusted instead of controlling, you stepped closer into agreement with what was already planned for you. That agreement is powerful. Scripture often shows God responding not to words, but to posture, to the heart that remains teachable, to the spirit that listens before acting. You've been living from that place more than you realize. There were habits you released quietly, thought patterns you corrected without telling anyone, temptations you walked away from simply because they no longer fit who you are becoming. Those moments carried weight. Divine validation doesn't always come as affirmation from people. Often it comes as an inner knowing, a subtle sense that you are no longer fighting yourself, that your decisions bring peace instead of chaos. You felt that. Even when things weren't clear externally, there was a steadiness internally, a calm that returned quicker than it used to, a resilience that didn't require explanation. That is God confirming your direction. Breaking old cycles is not just personal growth. From a faith perspective, it's obedience. It's choosing alignment over comfort. And obedience doesn't go unnoticed. There are doors that only open once the internal work is complete. Not because God withholds, but because what's on the other side requires a certain level of stability. You are reaching that level now. You didn't rush the process. You didn't shortcut the work. You let conviction shape you instead of resisting it. That matters. God trusts those who move carefully with what they're given. Those who don't expose every seed before it has roots. Those who understand timing. That trust is being established with you. You may not see immediate external validation yet, but pay attention to the inner confirmations. The way confusion has decreased. The way clarity comes faster. The way certain distractions no longer hold power over you. These are not coincidences. They are signs of alignment. Scripture speaks of fruit revealing the tree, but fruit doesn't appear overnight. First comes strengthening, then endurance, then, in the right season, visible growth. You are between strengthening and endurance. God is not testing you to see if you'll fail. He's confirming that you're ready to move differently than before, with discernment, with patience, with integrity that doesn't depend on recognition. Your transformation has already altered your trajectory. Even if nothing dramatic has happened yet, the direction has changed. And direction matters more than speed. You didn't just break habits. You broke agreements with versions of yourself that could not carry what's coming. That required courage. And heaven responds to courage that is quiet and consistent. You don't need to ask God if He sees you. He does. The peace you've been experiencing is not accidental. The sense of rightness, even in uncertainty, is not imagined. It's confirmation that you are walking in step, even when the path feels narrow. Keep honoring what you've already learned. Keep moving from conviction, not pressure. Keep trusting the process you didn't rush. Validation is already happening. It just isn't loud yet. And that's exactly how it needs to be. There was a season that tested you in ways you didn't expect. not just externally but internally. A time where things felt heavier, slower, more isolating than you were prepared for. You kept going, but some days it felt like you were moving through resistance instead of progress. That season mattered. It wasn't comfortable and it wasn't meant to be, but it also wasn't punishment. It was pressure applied with precision. You felt alone even when people were technically around. Conversations didn't reach you. Encouragement didn't land the way it used to. There was a sense that no one could fully understand what you were carrying. And yet you carried it. There were moments when you questioned yourself. Moments when fatigue set in, not just in your body, but in your spirit. You wondered how much longer you could stay patient, how much longer you could stay quiet, how much longer you could trust without seeing movement. God was not distant in that season. He was close, shaping endurance. Scripture often speaks of refining fire, but refinement is not dramatic. It's repetitive. It's slow. It's the steady removal of what cannot survive heat. You experienced that internally. Certain attachments weakened. Certain expectations burned away. Not violently, but gradually. You stopped relying on emotional motivation. You learned to move without it. That's endurance. The loneliness wasn't meant to break you. It was meant to show you what you reach for when nothing else is available. And you reached for steadiness. For faith that didn't need constant reassurance. That mattered. You didn't glorify the pain. You didn't build identity around struggle. You simply stayed present in it. That's what allowed the season to pass without hardening you. There's a difference between suffering that shapes and suffering that consumes. You stayed open. You didn't let bitterness take root. Even when answers were delayed, you resisted the urge to become cynical. That restraint protected you. There were nights when your thoughts felt heavy, when silence felt loud, when waiting felt endless, and still you showed up the next day. You didn't quit. You didn't abandon the work happening inside you. From a faith perspective, that consistency is powerful. Scripture often connects perseverance with maturity, not reward. Maturity comes first. You learned how to sit with uncertainty without collapsing into fear. You learned how to trust without needing control. Those lessons don't come in comfort. They come in fire. But notice this. The fire didn't destroy you, clarified you. What remained after that season is more solid than what you had before. Your reactions are calmer. Your faith is quieter, but stronger. Your sense of self is less dependent on outcomes. That is not accidental. God uses dark seasons not to punish, but to prepare, to strip away what would fracture under future weight, to teach you how to stand without leaning on unstable support. You are standing now. Even if parts of you still feel tender, you are not fragile. You have already endured what you once thought would undo you, and you did it without becoming someone you didn't recognize. That matters deeply. The season may have felt unfair. It may have felt unnecessary, but it did something essential. It taught you how to remain steady when conditions are not ideal. That steadiness is required for what comes next. You don't need to relive that season. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to make sense of every moment. Just recognize this. You passed through the fire with your integrity intact, your faith intact, your capacity intact. And because of that, you are no longer the same person who entered it. That season is behind you now, and it left you stronger than you realize. There came a moment, quiet and almost unremarkable from the outside, where something inside you settled. Not everything changed at once, but a decision formed. Not spoken out loud, not dramatic, just clear. You chose consistency, not because it felt good, not because results were visible, but because something in you understood that returning to old patterns was no longer an option. You weren't being forced forward. You were agreeing inwardly. That was the turning point. Before that moment, faith required effort. You had to remind yourself why you were waiting, why you were holding back, why you weren't reacting the way you used to. After that moment, it became simpler. Still challenging, but simpler. You stopped negotiating with yourself. From a faith perspective, this is where obedience becomes natural. Not perfect, not rigid, but rooted. Scripture often shows that transformation begins with a quiet yes, not a public declaration. You gave that yes privately. You began choosing alignment even when no one would know, even when no one would benefit but you. Especially then, you chose to stay grounded when it would have been easier to react. You chose restraint when expression was available. You chose patience when shortcuts appeared. Those choices reshaped you. They didn't make life instantly easier, but they made you clearer. And clarity changes how everything else unfolds. You stopped chasing confirmation. You stopped needing reassurance for every step. You trusted what had already been proven internally. That trust allowed you to move with less noise. You've noticed this. Decisions take less time now. There's less inner debate, less second-guessing. When something isn't aligned, you feel it quickly. When something is right, there's peace, even if it's challenging. That's the result of repeated inner choice. God responds to consistency more than intensity. Loud faith can fade. Quiet faith that shows up daily reshapes destiny. You've been showing up in ways no one applauded. He noticed. This turning point wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about committing to who you already were becoming. You stopped resisting the process. You stopped hoping it would pass quickly. You accepted the pace. That acceptance unlocked something. You no longer feel the need to force outcomes. You do your part and release the rest. You trust timing in a way you didn't before, not because you were told to, but because you experienced what happens when you rush. You learned the cost of misalignment, and you chose differently. This inner choice carries spiritual weight, not because it earns favor, but because it creates capacity. You are now able to hold what would have overwhelmed you before. You are more stable, more grounded, less driven by emotion, less shaken by uncertainty. That didn't happen by accident. Every time you chose faith over fear, patience over impulse, obedience over comfort, you strengthened an inner structure that will support what's next. This was the moment you stopped being shaped by circumstances and started being guided by conviction. It didn't feel dramatic, felt settled. And that's how you know it was real. You don't need to mark that moment publicly. You don't need to explain it to anyone. Just recognize it. You chose alignment when it was costly. You chose consistency when it was unnoticed. That choice changed everything, even if the evidence hasn't fully surfaced yet. The shift has already happened. Now the response follows. After that inner decision settled, things didn't explode into movement. They softened. Space opened, not outwardly at first, but within you. A clarity that didn't demand action. A sense of right timing that didn't need explanation. This is how alignment often feels. God's response to obedience is not always immediate change in circumstance. Often, it's a recalibration of perception. You begin to see differently, hear differently, discern more accurately. You felt this. What once felt urgent now feels optional. What once pulled at you no longer has the same weight. There's less inner noise, fewer competing voices. Decisions come with a quieter confidence. That is heaven responding. Scripture speaks of peace as a guard, not a reward. Peace doesn't mean everything is resolved. It means you are protected while things are being arranged. You're experiencing that protection now. You're less anxious about timing, less reactive to uncertainty. Even when things are unresolved, your spirit isn't restless the way it used to be. That's alignment. Subtle shifts have begun around you. Not dramatic changes, but small openings. Moments of confirmation. Encounters that feel purposeful instead of random. You may not have connected them yet, but they are part of a larger orchestration. God moves with precision. You may notice that delays no longer frustrate you as deeply. When something doesn't move forward, you don't internalize it as rejection. You recognize it as redirection. That perspective change is significant. It means trust has taken root. Your internal rhythm has slowed to match divine timing. You're no longer rushing ahead or lagging behind. You're learning to move when prompted and wait when led. That requires sensitivity. Scripture often describes those who are led rather than driven. You're shifting into that posture. Less striving, more listening, less forcing, more alignment. Clarity doesn't always come as answers. Sometimes it comes as the absence of confusion. You're experiencing that now. Even without full information, you're not overwhelmed. That's not natural. It's spiritual alignment. You may also notice that certain connections are fading naturally. Not through conflict, but through quiet separation. And others are beginning to form slowly, intentionally. These shifts are not accidental. God is aligning environment with identity. What no longer fits is falling away without effort. What supports your growth is approaching without force. This is how heaven responds when the internal work is complete enough to support external change. You're not being rushed into anything. You're being positioned. Timing is being arranged around you. Pieces are moving that you can't see yet. And because you're not interfering, they're able to align correctly. Your role right now is not to accelerate the process. It's to remain sensitive, to stay attentive, to continue honoring the quiet alignment you've entered. You don't need to announce readiness. You don't need to chase opportunity. What is meant for you will recognize you when the moment is right. This is a season of internal agreement with heaven's pace. And because of that agreement, things will unfold with less resistance than before. You're not waiting passively. You're waiting in alignment. And that posture invites a response that is steady, precise, and sustainable. What comes next will not disrupt your peace. It will arrive in it. What you went through was never meant to end with survival. The pressure, the waiting, the inner refinement all served a function beyond endurance. It was shaping how you would move when purpose became active. Pain did not define you, but it prepared you. You now carry awareness that can't be taught. Sensitivity that wasn't learned in comfort. Discernment that came from experience, not instruction. These are not abstract qualities. They are tools. Purpose at this level doesn't begin with visibility. It begins with responsibility, with the ability to hold influence without misusing it, to serve without needing recognition, to move with integrity even when opportunity presents shortcuts. You are being activated into that kind of purpose. What you endured refined your motivation. You are no longer driven by the need to prove anything. That frees you to act from service rather than validation, from faith rather than fear. Scripture often shows calling unfolding through obedience in ordinary moments. Purpose is revealed not when everything is clear, but when the heart is ready. You are ready in ways you weren't before. Your experiences have positioned you to recognize what others overlook, to respond with patience where others react, to bring steadiness into spaces that are chaotic. This is not accidental. God does not waste seasons. The responsibility you're stepping into may not come with a title. It may not be labeled or announced. It will likely show up as a quiet invitation, a nudge to act, a moment where your presence matters more than your words. You'll recognize it by the peace that accompanies it. Purpose activation doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like alignment. You'll know when to move, not because of urgency, but because of clarity. Because the choice feels right even if it's stretching. Your obedience has prepared you to respond without hesitation when that moment comes. There will be opportunities to serve, to support, to build, to contribute in ways that align with who you've become. These opportunities may not look impressive from the outside, but they will carry weight. What you carry now is stability, and stability is rare. God entrusts influence to those who won't be altered by it, who remain grounded when things expand, who don't forget the lessons learned in hidden seasons. You are being trusted. Purpose is not about doing more. It's about doing what's aligned. You'll find that certain actions feel effortless now, not because they're easy, but because they match your inner structure. You're not stepping into purpose to escape pain. You're stepping into purpose because pain has already shaped you. That means you won't abandon it when it becomes challenging. Service at this level is quiet, consistent, intentional, is showing up when needed, speaking when led, remaining silent when wisdom requires it. You've already been practicing this without realizing it. The season ahead will invite you to apply what you've learned, to act from conviction rather than emotion, to move from discernment rather than impulse. You don't need to seek purpose. It's already approaching you. Your role is to remain available, to stay attentive, to respond when the invitation comes, even if it doesn't match your expectations. What you're stepping into will not contradict the peace you've cultivated. It will require responsibility. It will require humility. It will require continued obedience. But it will also feel right, because purpose, when activated at the right time, doesn't overwhelm. It settles, and you are ready to carry it. Before this moment passes, I want to invite you into something simple and grounded, not out of obligation, not out of pressure, only if it feels aligned with where you are. If this message met you in a quiet place, if it put words to something you've been carrying internally, that recognition is not accidental. Alignment deepens when it's acknowledged. You don't have to do much. A small action taken with intention is enough. If you feel led, you can gently like this video, not as support for a channel, but as a marker, a quiet agreement that this message resonated with your spirit, that you're honoring what you recognized. If staying connected to messages like this feels supportive in this season, you can subscribe, not because you need more content, but because you're choosing to remain in spaces that reinforce alignment, patience, and discernment. And if you feel comfortable, you can leave a short comment, even a single word, not to explain yourself, not to perform, just to participate. There is something grounding about acknowledging alignment publicly, even in a small way. It's not about visibility. It's about intention. Scripture speaks of agreement having power, not because of volume, but because of unity. When you align internally and externally, things settle more deeply. You don't need to share details. You don't need to tell your story. Your presence is enough. If you choose to engage, let it be calm. Let it be honest. Let it be unforced. And if you choose not to, that's okay too. Alignment cannot be rushed or demanded. This is simply an invitation. A deeper path doesn't begin with dramatic steps. It begins with quiet consistency, with choosing environments that reflect where you're headed, not where you've been. Stay close to what brings peace. Stay connected to what sharpens discernment. Stay receptive without pressure. Whatever you decide, know this. Your journey is unfolding at the right pace. You don't need to compare it. You don't need to explain it. Just continue honoring what you've been sensing. The next step will meet you when you're ready. And you already are, more than you realize. Before we part, let this settle. You didn't arrive here by accident. Not because an algorithm favored you. Not because you were searching endlessly. You arrived because something in you was already listening, already aligned, already receptive. That matters. What you've been honoring in silence is real. The restraint, the patience, the inner agreement you made when no one was watching. Those choices didn't disappear into nothing. They shaped you. God is preparing your next level of prosperity, and it will not require you to become louder, faster, or more visible than you are now. It will require you to remain grounded in what you've already cultivated. Prosperity at this level is not about excess. It's about stewardship, about being able to carry increase without losing peace, about receiving without rushing, about moving forward without needing to explain yourself. You are already learning how to do that. If it feels right, you can leave the number 777 in the comments. Not as a symbol for others, but as a quiet seal for yourself. A personal marker of alignment, completion, and trust in timing. And if staying connected feels supportive, you can subscribe. Gently, without pressure. Simply as a way of choosing consistency in spaces that reflect your current posture. There is no rush. You don't need to prove that you're chosen. You don't need to defend your quiet. You don't need to convince anyone of what's happening inside you. What's unfolding will speak clearly in its own time. Remain still when stillness is required. Move when movement is prompted. Speak when words are given. You are not behind. You are not overlooked. You are not late. You are becoming. Let peace remain with you as you step forward. Let clarity guide your decisions. Let patience continue to protect what's growing. And remember this, even when doubt tries to return. Silence has been your safeguard. Alignment has been your strength. What comes next will meet you gently. You are ready. Rest in that.